It being 4 o'clock, we will call this meeting of Executive Committee to order. And we recognize that Prince Albert is located within Treaty 6 territory and is the homeland of the Dakota and Métis. We extend our respect to all Indigenous people for valuable past and present contributions and recognize and respect cultural diversity within the city of Prince Albert. Call to order, and we are now at approval of the agenda. Do we have a mover? Approval is first. Yep. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move.
All right, any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, we will open the vote. Vote is open. I think we're missing one vote. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Right. So vote carries. Thank you. Declaration of conflict of interest. If anyone has a conflict of interest, we would declare it. Oh, I'm sorry. And Councillor Miller.
Thank you. If anybody pulls item 6.1, I'll be removing myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Adoption of the minutes. Mayor Dion.
I'll move the minutes of October 3rd.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Vote is open. We're missing one. Oh, and vote is carried. Delegations, I see none. Moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items to be pulled? Councillor Kilmer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to pull 6.1.
6.1. Any other items to be pulled? Hearing none, do we have a motion to move the balance? Oh, sorry, is there Mayor Dion?
No, I'm moving the motion.
Moving the balance? Okay, so I will try to open that vote. Vote is open. Waiting on 2 votes. Oh, no, right, carried. Yeah, well, it's fine. All right, we have 6.1, 2022 settlement municipal share of housing projects. Councillor Kilmer.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I have a couple of questions for the Director of Planning and Development. My questions are, I just want to have a better understanding of the Prince Albert Housing Authority and the number of units available. I'm wondering, what are the number of units that we have in Prince Albert and the number of units that are not currently available to be used, and exactly how the housing reserve is funded and used for that.
Director.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Kilmer, for the question. I can certainly report back with more precise numbers for you as time permits. I know Prince Albert Housing Authority does have a number of units throughout the city, upwards of 900 or so, I believe. There are a large portion of those that are vacant, and that's due to a number of reasons. I know they've got a few buildings that they're renovating as we speak that have taken a number off of the market. There's a building that was burnt down, as you know, a couple of years ago, which took that off the market as well. So while I don't know the exact number, I would say there is a fairly significant percentage of unoccupied units operated by Prince Edward Housing Authority that aren't currently on the market.
Okay. Another part of my, that I'm wondering, I do see that we, as a municipal government, are responsible for 5% of the funding that the Saskatchewan Housing Authority pays. When are we, when, I guess I'm just wondering about budgeting, being able to budget well for what they are providing. So I see in this letter that in 2022, they've spent upwards of $2 million, and then our share is substantial, the 5%. Even though it's only 5%, it's quite substantial for a municipal government. Are we included in any of their decision-making, their own budgeting? Is the city at all involved?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Kilmer. Yeah, you're correct. So the numbers we were provided, I think upwards of $2.5 million or so were spent, and our proportionate amount was about $67,000. We can see in that same document that they are making some estimates for 2023 with the municipal share of over $100,000. So that's a significant number. I know that council had interest in a member of council sitting on the provincial board, and I'll have to confirm whether or not that that happened. I believe it did. I believe Councillor Miller sits on that board. So, in short, to answer, she's the chair. Thank you, Councillor Cody. So to answer that question of if we have a part in those decisions, I think having a member on that provincial board confirms that yes, we do. And as of just a few years ago, we did not have a member on that board. So that I think that was a significant step that council chose to make in making that recommendation and having Councillor Miller appointed.
Good, thank you very much. And then my last point, for the amount last year in 2022 that we owed, I seem to recollect from the budget meeting that we paid that from the housing reserve. Do we anticipate continuing to pay that from the housing reserve, and how do we, how is the housing reserve funded?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Kilmer. So our housing reserve initially was funded based on 4% of the taxation that we received from these nonprofit housing entities. Now, with that number fluctuating from year to year, council made the decision about 4 years ago that rather than tying it to a specific percentage, we actually accounted for a specific number. So it's a sustainable number. I believe it's in about $45,000 or so. Now and what was the second part of your question, sorry?
No, you are answering how the housing reserve is funded.
That's right, thank you. And to your point of the housing reserve being utilized to fund this portion, yes, that is what is being presented for 2024's budget for your consideration. The housing reserve policy does not specifically speak to the Prince Edward Housing Authority and paying for that net loss. However, the policy does explicitly say that council does have the authority to fund certain projects as they wish. But there isn't a specific program that has been developed as per that policy that speaks to the housing authority.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll move the motion.
We have a mover. Any further discussion? I just had a question for the director. I just wanted to remind myself, do you recall how many years it's been since we, as City Council at budget, have put that $43,000 into the reserve as per our current policy?
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor. We've been putting the money into that reserve. I'll have that confirmation for you at budget time, but it has been, we've had that reserve in place for a number of years, I would say upwards of a decade or so.
Maybe this is a question for budget, but I guess this is now a comment. It's either 2 or 3 years of past years that we have not, we at council have not placed the $43,000 amount into that reserve to replenish that reserve, but that is within our the policy states that that is what we do. We have not done that. Mayor Dion.
I'll be quick. I think the reason is, do you know the amount that's in the reserve, or is that something you'll get to us?
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. I
That's
know,
why we didn't put the
I don't have
43
an
in.
exact number for you, but I believe we're around $500,000 or so.
Yeah, I think that's why we didn't stop funding. Thank you.
I'm sure it was 2 in a row, but I could be wrong. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to the vote. How's it? Vote is open. Carried. If anyone wanted to, thank you. Number 7, reports of administration and committees. Barton Drive Traffic Calming Trial, and we have a PowerPoint presentation from Evan Hastings, our Transportation and Traffic Manager. Thank you. Oh, right.
Afternoon, everyone. The purpose of this report is to discuss the traffic statistics collected and community consultation for the Barton Drive Traffic Calming Trial. To give a brief background, in 2020, the city began to receive complaints about speeding on Barton Drive. In order to capture the speeding problem, the Prince Albert Police Service and the Department of Public Works completed independent studies that verified an 85th percentile speed of 42 to 44 kilometers per hour. So for those of you who may need a refresher, the 85th percentile speed is the speed at which 85% of vehicles travel below and 15% travel above. So at this time in 2021, the traffic calming was not warranted as per the traffic calming policy and not recommended. In 2022, a city council motion was made to proceed with the traffic calming trial in 2023. So here's a nice eastbound photo of the Barton Drive traffic calming trial. This was a temporary speed cushion that was installed on May 2nd. Works very similar to a speed hump, except with strategically placed gaps to allow emergency services such as the fire department to travel through unimpeded if needed. And it was removed October 18th. In a nutshell, this was approximately a 6-month-long trial. It allowed the department the chance to talk to the community. A survey went out to all residents in August to determine how they perceived the calming measure. And data was collected before, during, and after the trial to ensure accurate data was collected and to see what the actual impact of the speed cushion was. So during the trial, as we can see here, we have 3 text fields. Each of them represent a road tube that was laid out to collect traffic statistics. We're going to start from the left and work our way to the right. But on the left, near Coombe Drive, we see an 85th percentile speed of 44 kilometers per hour. This was actually the same before, during, and after the trial, showing that the speed cushion really had no effect at this location. In the mid-block location, we see the 85th percentile speed of 30 kilometers per hour. Traffic slowed substantially to go over the cushion. And on the right side near Eagle Street, we see an 85th percentile speed of 37 kilometers per hour. In total, during this 1-week study, 5 vehicles exceeded 65 kilometers per hour, all near Coombe Drive, and the maximum speed recorded was 77 to 80 kilometers per hour. When the cushion was removed on October 18th, we put the road tubes back out into the exact same location, and we'll go from left to right once again. We see the 85th percentile speed near Coombe Drive, 44 kilometers per hour once again. Where the speed cushion used to be located, we saw the 85th percentile speed rise to 43 kilometers per hour, and then near Eagle Street rise to 39 kilometers per hour. Not shown in this presentation, but in the report, also further east on Barton Drive, we saw the 85th percentile speed go from 41 to 39 during the trial. So what we can see from this is the speed cushion, it did have a good impact where it was located, and then all the way east on Barton Drive, not so much of an impact to the west. Near Coombe Drive, we saw 6 vehicles during this week go over 65. In the mid-block location, we saw 7, and near Eagle Street, we saw 4. So in total, about 1 in 1,000 vehicles exceeded 65 kilometers. The most important part of this trial, though, was the community consultation and making sure that everybody was heard in this area who was impacted by the speed cushion. In total, we delivered 194 surveys, to which 90 responses were received, which is a 46% response rate, which was a very good sample size. 6 questions were asked, and all the answers and questions are shown in attachments 3 and 4 of the report. The most important question now and moving forward, though, is do you feel it is in the neighborhood's best interest to continue with permanent installation of the traffic calming measure? To which 47 people replied no, 42 replied yes. So the recommendation at this time is that the report be received as information and filed. 53% of the impacted residents voted against the permanent installation of the speed cushion, and the traffic statistics collected before, during, and after the traffic calming trial do not warrant traffic calming. So thank you, and at this time I can answer any questions.
Questions? Councillor Solomon. Oh, it's changed. Sorry, Councillor Edwards. The microphone names
Yeah,
are changed.
We'll change back next meeting.
Yes. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So, and thanks, Evan, for all the work you've done on this. This is, it's been lots of work for you, I understand. So, how do you feel, or sorry, not how do you feel, how did the questionnaire go for the Barton area only? So Barton Drive, because I know the numbers you have given included Eagle and a few locations outside of, I don't know, 75 meters or 200 meters of the speed cushion. So do you know how that went? How did the numbers reflect for Barton?
Yeah, that was actually an interesting result as well. I made sure to process that. For that one, the same question was asked. 51% of Barton Drive did not want to proceed with the traffic calming measure permanently, and 49% did.
51 to 49.
Yeah, so 21 people to 20.
Yeah, okay. And are we working, you're working on a new policy, or have we implemented that new policy yet?
No, there's a new traffic calming program and policy ready to go. We wanted to make sure it was after this report to make sure we stayed impartial, but that is ready and that will be coming to a future council meeting.
Right, okay, so we're still working with the old measures, okay. Thank you for that. And I just have a couple of comments. So there is a speeding problem on Barton, not the average speed, but some of the speeds captured are near criminal. And it's a real shame that 118 kilometers, I think, was the fastest captured on our speed sign. That's craziness. And I understand that, you know, the speed bump, you know, or the cushion maybe isn't the most effective, but it is a straight street where there is a speeding problem when it exceeds, you know, higher levels, not the average, as you pointed out. Although I do think that 15% of the speeders should matter, not just 85. But there is a problem, and it's kind of almost shameful that, you know, I've seen some of the videos where people would actually drive onto the curb to avoid the speed hump. That's endangering the public. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Or sit in front of the speed hump and burn rubber just to harass the families that have tried to curb the speed. It's embarrassing that people would do that. I just can't fathom doing that. Anyway, I hope the harassment goes away now. I'm sorry it occurred, and I thank you for Mr. Hammersmith for bringing this forward and caring about the community, because that's what this is all about. It's caring about the safety of residents. It's not for his own purpose. It's about the safety of the residents. And it is a fast road, not maybe as fast as some of the other roads in the community, as we'll probably find out in short order. I don't like just receiving and filing this. I don't know what else we can do. I may, prior to council, change that motion and instead of just putting it to bed, we'll look at changing that, but I don't know I don't know what that is at this point. So I'm not going to support the receive and file, but I appreciate the work and the effort that you've done on this. So thank you very much.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you. So my question is, has the fire department had a complaint about going over these speed bumps? Or have they even been called towards that area or not? Do you know that?
I'm not too sure about any complaints going over these speed cushions. However, the Prince Albert Fire Department was consulted to ensure that those gaps were placed perfectly in line with their vehicles to make sure that the wheels could go through unimpeded. So although there may be a very slight impact to speed, it would be much reduced as compared to the speed humps, which would slow them 15 to 20 seconds.
Thank you. Also, you know, I had a speeder on my street as well, a young fella. And what I did is I went and talked to the mother. And the situation was cured. So, I mean, like, if we're doing criminal activity over 100 miles an hour, that's absolutely beyond ridiculous. I just feel that then the police should be called as well and go to that house and speak to the parents, because I believe that, you know, it takes a village to raise children, and if the police need to be called, they need to be called no matter who child it is. And I believe the issue would be solved then.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I did want to point this out, that Mr. Hammersmith has tried to work this out within the neighborhood, and it's resulted in not good things back towards him. And that's unfortunate, because we should be able to kind of police our own behavior when it comes to this type of thing. And unfortunately, people think they have the right to go 80 on a regular basis. But it's not always kids. It's people that just are ripping down the street, and they don't necessarily live on Barton either. They use Barton to get home, and we know one home that is a regular person. But the problem is we don't have the enforcement, and that's unfortunate. And I've said it before, we don't have the enforcement, and I wish we did. I wish we had more officers in the community focusing on this. I think it would help. So that's everything. Thank you.
Mayor Dion.
I'll move the recommendation, but I also have a comment to the manager. In the future, can you add a question? I had talked to quite a few residents on Barton, and they said they weren't asked. If they were, they felt what was more effective than the speed bump was the speed sign. They felt that speed sign was more effective and warning people to slow down and than this. So just in the future, if you could collect that data, because it would have been interesting, because when I walked that street, majority told me they thought the traffic slowed a lot more for that sign than they did for the speed bumps.
Absolutely, and that'll be considered in the upcoming program that'll come to council.
Thank you.
We have a motion. Any further discussion? Vote is open. One more to vote. I'll close the vote. Vote is carried. We are moving now to item 7.2, 2024 rates and fees, Cook Municipal Golf Course. And we have a verbal presentation from the Director of Community Services, Jody Belay. Thank you. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of council, for the opportunity. So very briefly, as council recalls, this was first considered at the September Executive Committee meeting. There were concerns from members of council related to the initial recommendation from the Golf Course Advisory Committee. Due to how it was structured, as you recall, there was a multi-year phase-out for the seniors pass rate for those that would be becoming members in the future. So I thank you to Mayor Dion and Councillor Cody at the Golf Course Advisory Committee meeting for also helping with explaining council's concern with that topic. I think it was a good discussion at our November 2nd meeting related to the ins and outs behind the need for the season pass. There was some compromise, I would say, at the committee table after the input was considered by each of the member clubs' representatives, which then resulted in the motion that we have today. So a reduced approach, I would say, to the reduction, only focusing on the 2024 golf season, but bringing that reduction of the adult pass from 19% to 15%. So only focusing on one season with a commitment that a further review be completed with the committee as part of the work plan. I think at this point I would ask if Mayor Dion or Councillor Cody had any other information or if I missed anything from that discussion, but I think that was the bulk.
Thank you, Director. I'll move to Mayor Dion.
I'll move the recommendation because that covered exactly what we agreed to, the 15% of the committee.
Further discussion? Hearing none, I will open the vote. Vote is open. Carried. We are moving on to 7.3, true cost of parking, with a PowerPoint presentation from Craig Gittinger, Director of Planning and Development Services. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you to Council for the opportunity. I've also brought with me our two resident experts when it comes to parking. We've got our Bylaw Services Manager, Trina Wareham, and our Transportation Manager, Evan Hastings. So I'll make our short PowerPoint presentation, and for your more detailed explanations to your questions, they will answer those for you. So when I took over parking, when I took over the parking enforcement under a year ago, one of the big questions I had, and I know that council's had over the last number of years, was what does parking actually cost the city? I know we reference parking revenues, we reference meter revenues, but I've never really had a good grasp on what that net cost is to the city, because obviously with every revenue that we get, there is a costing to the city, whether it comes in the form of operations, wages, you name it. So the project that we undertook was to take a close look on what that true cost of parking and what that true revenue was to the city when it comes to everything related to parking. And this is obviously timely as we head into budget deliberations on Thursday and Friday. So when we talk about parking, we've got 5 sources of parking revenue that I'd like to break down for you. The first is the Sask Polytech parking lot. We've got the airport, we've got parking tickets, parking meters, and we've got parking passes. So I'll show you what some of those revenues are for the city, more importantly what those expenses are, and what net revenue is to the city when it's all said and done. As you can see from this pie chart, it's broken down into, again, those 5 subcategories of where we get our revenue. So Sask Polytech is a small sliver along with the airport. Parking ticket revenue is what you see in gray. The metered area is in yellow, and then we've got the 5-hour parking permits as well. Now, as Evan and I and Trina, along with our Director of Public Works, started looking at the numbers for revenues, it was a kind of a stark reality for us, as those revenues have certainly been impacted over the last number of years, and there's a few different reasons for that, which I'll explain. But you'll see in 2016, 17, and 18, revenues were upwards of over $1.2 million just for revenues. Then COVID-19 hit. We've had a number of businesses relocate from our downtown, unfortunately, and we're looking at, for 22-23, only half of that when it comes to revenue. So we wanted to dive into that and find out a little bit more why. We don't predict that we'll get up to the levels that our revenues were pre-COVID, but we are confident that we can recover some of those costs, reduce some of our expenses to potentially increase that over time, and that's what is part of the recommendation this evening. So when you look at revenues, you know, as you can see for the difference in revenue from 16 to 18 versus 22 to 23, it's a significant drop, right? SAS Polytech is down $63,000. The airport, that's a small good news story, that is up about $3,500. But the airport lots, parking ticket revenue, parking meter revenue, and 5-hour lots are up, but those other ones have reduced significantly. So $153,000, $172,000, and $155,000 respectively. The good news, again, regarding SAS Polytech, that is down significantly, $63,000, but as our transportation manager reported to you about a month ago, our ridership and our transit has increased significantly, which is excellent news. We got a lot of newcomers to our city that are utilizing our transit, which is just excellent. Now, again, with those revenues, we need to consider expenses. Expenses are up since 2018, approximately 20%. We're looking at wages, overtime, sweeping and snow removal, things like that, the sign shop, electricity, it all adds up significantly. And between 16 and 18, we looked at about $269,000, $270,000 worth of expenses. But for May, the last year or so, May till May, we're at 332. So again, that has increased about 20%, while our revenue has decreased, and that has a significant impact on us. I want to make it very clear that these expenses do not include things like new curbs, new sidewalks, laying down new asphalt, things like that. Those are capital costs that are over and above these general operations, and as you can expect, those equate to hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. So when we talk about net revenue, obviously that's an easy formula. We look at expenses and we subtract those from our total revenues. And we are down, like I said, about 48% since COVID, and that represents about $590,000 in reduced net revenue compared to 2016, 2018. So that is revenue that we are not seeing in our budget for this year, just as an example. We used to average about $1.2 million per year in revenues, but now we're down to about $636,000 as an example. Now just a quick overview of those 5 operational sectors, I'll call them, for expenses and revenues: on-street, downtown, metered parking. So as you can read there, that is our parking meters that we gather revenue from downtown. We get about $378,000, or we did get about $378,000 in 2016 to 18. Our expenses totaled about $87,000. So that net revenue to the city was $291,000. Now, as we look at the last year or so, expenses have gone up, $111,000. Revenue has unfortunately come down to $264,000. So that net revenue is $152,000 for the city of Prince Albert. Now for our downtown paid parking lots. So you can get passes in our lots, and this also includes, in some lots, we've got meters as well. So this includes both of those revenue sources. Again, in 2016 to 2018, you'll see a trend here. Revenues are high, expenses are relatively low. But as we look at the last year or so, revenues are down to $140,000. Expenses are up with a a reduction of revenue of $54,000. So that's about a $40,000 reduction from, 4 or 5 short years ago. And this is just a map of our downtown parking lots, which is part of the report. I won't go into extreme detail on this map. Sask Polytech parking lot, as you'll see, those numbers are down significantly from $105,000 a few years ago to $42,000 in revenue. Again, expenses were $21,000, now they're almost $28,000. But again, this is tied to that good news story of our ridership exponentially increasing, which is a really fantastic story. And I think those revenues, I can't say whether they are a perfect match, but those are certainly reflected in this loss. For the airport parking lot, again, 2016 to 2018, we saw about $376,000 or so in revenue and about $45,000 in expenses. So that's a net revenue of about $331,000. And in the last year, again, those numbers are all averages from 2016 to 2018. The last year, we're down to about $175,000 in net revenue due to a reduction in revenue and an increase in expenses. Enforcement and ticketing. So those are where our enforcement officers are out and about issuing tickets for parking illegally. Our revenue used to be about $470,000 on average between 2016 and 2018, and now we're down to about $295,000, $296,000 in revenue for enforcement and ticketing. So what we're trying to do, we have identified a number of areas where we feel we can establish some efficiencies. We feel that we can establish potentially even some reductions in costing. Now this revenue for the city, as you know, is very key to our budgeting. It represents a large number, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we want to make sure that that remains intact, and we want it to grow over time. So we're going to be very carefully looking at what we've found over the last year or so of this project, where we can find efficiencies, which parking lots are used for what, and looking at different opportunities for revenues. So with the approval of the motion in front of you today, we will be reporting back to you at an upcoming executive committee meeting with some recommendations. And over the course of the next year, we hope that disparity between revenues and expenses shrinks, and we can continue in an upward trend for revenues for the city. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I believe, yes it is. And I can answer your questions along with our two managers.
Thank you for the very thorough presentation, Director. We'll move to Mayor Dion.
So a couple questions and a comment. Is snow removal included on those expenses?
Yes, it is.
Okay, because that's a big ticket item that's gone up quite a bit. My other just general comment is, I sit on the airport committee, and we're gonna see the revenue go up. It's tied to the operations of the mines. We have almost 500 parking stalls out there, and when the mines are shut down, as they have been for the last year, but now you see the two uranium mines are gonna fire up, it's gonna fire up. So then they'll be coming back to the airport because they fly in 2 weeks in and 2 weeks out. And then we're also, there's a new company that's opening up a mine, and we've met with them, and they're gonna start to advertise too that they will pick up employees in Prince Albert. So that's gonna help us as well, because they're short of employees, and they realize from Cameco and the rest, you can get employees from PA as long as you pick them up here, so they're gonna set their shuttle to pick up here. So I do know in the airport we'll get some recovery to that, strictly because it's all based on the mines and what the mines do. If they're fully operating, we make the money. If we don't, they don't close. But that's all my comments, and I'll move the recommendation.
We have a mover. And now Councillor Kilmer.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I just have some clarifications or better understanding that I am wondering about, in particular, the enforcement and ticketing summary. When we're talking about, and if we're looking at that slide, when we're talking about that amount, for example, 2016, 2018, 468,000, is that the actual money paid? Like it was actually paid, that is not the actual amount in tickets? So I'm wondering that ratio. just to, and it's a theme, I think. Same thing with the current. And then I'm wondering what our outstanding amount of parking ticket revenue is.
Thanks, Councillor Kilmer. I'll get our bylaw manager, Trina Wareham, to answer that for you.
So when you're looking at the revenue on the slide for parking ticket revenue, that is the revenue that actually literally comes into our cash register, the actual dollars. But it doesn't matter if it's a current ticket or a ticket that we towed somebody because they owed us $5,000 in parking tickets from the last 8 years. It'll still be paid in that current year, so it's cash that current year. So.
Okay,
a
so
big-
then you're telling me we can't specifically year to year know the amount of tickets versus the income, but what is the amount of outstanding?
1.4 million.
$1.4 million?
Yes.
In outstanding tickets?
Yes.
Since time began of ticketing?
Pretty much. It's sort of a vicious cycle. Even when we got, for a while, when we had the police towing for our enforcement, we were bringing in a lot more revenue. As you could see, almost $500,000. The more, we just keep writing tickets. So it's sort of it just keeps growing. It doesn't really stop. It'd be a really big job to get that down.
Okay, so I think I will wait for this in budget to consider a few other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Dion.
Okay, I wasn't going to say a word till I heard 1.4, because that's not a true number. We've allowed write-offs every year. Some are uncollectible, some are 10, 12 years old that are not collectible. So I think in the future that we have to use a realistic amount on what's collectible. And first of all, we should start taking off that 1.4 million, the allotments that we've allowed for the losses. We do that every year and it's parked somewhere, but for some reason we don't write them off, but we have an allotment there to write off hundreds of thousands. And I'm waiting for that day to happen, because when I hear 1.4, I get mad. But then when I realize the real number and what's collectible, I calm down. So I think it's important that when we're asked outstanding tickets, and you're right, if you look at the books, the way we do it, it's 1.4. But the way general accounting practices is we do write off this certain amount, so we should show actually a more truer number than what we do.
Councillor Edwards.
So we keep talking about writing off the uncollectible, but we've also heard that we need some assistance in order to collect. But yet, we're status quo. And I don't understand that, where we need to come up with, someone needs to come up with a solution on how we have to collect from the violators. Or why even ticket them? It makes no sense to me. And we've seen and heard that there has to be a new solution come forward. And we've heard some of the ideas, but nothing's changed. And I'm not blaming the department, because we've heard the requests. But there needs to be some solutions come forward, whether that be on the police side of things or our side of things. But it's crazy that we have all of these violations continuing to pile up, yet we write them off eventually, but it's still outstanding to the city. So hopefully we can regroup and make some changes, and necessary changes. I think there'll probably be some talked about in budget. I'll be bringing some up in budget as well. But the ARPs, whether we need to have that on our side of things, we talked about that, $12,000 to have it, something like that, maybe it's worthwhile. But we need to change something, because we can't keep writing off all the violations.
Councillor Head.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Director, for the report. Gives us a kind of a snapshot on what what we're dealing with or have to face to address moving forward. These are, big drops of revenue, which would impact our budgeting. And you're right, enforcement is key. And how do we do that? I think we've talked about some options for our vehicles in an effort to try to get more revenue. But and I know in our budget, and probably a conversation we're going to have is about bad debt and writing that off. And we do that every year on debt that is unsustainable or unable to get it back. So that is in our budget every year. And so partly some of this would be in there, I imagine. And we'll have that more fulsome conversations this weekend about that. But thank you for the report. Gives us an idea, and I look forward to how we're going to address this moving forward for sure.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have some other questions, I forgot. So the revenue downtown is significantly lower, yet we have a university that has sparked up over the last few years. So is that increasing different areas, the parking lots, or how are we seeing that reflected? Or are we losing just too many businesses downtown to see that?
The revenue in the lots has gone up a little bit. There is a parking lot that's not ours, that's right across from the school that fills up first. So they're probably making more money than we are on that aspect. But the biggest decline is the businesses that have been closing down here, and with more to come, so.
Okay, so the private parking lot, are they charging the same as us?
No, they undercut us.
Okay, so we have to be in competition with them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the,
We don't compete just for the simple fact they're across the street, though.
sure, but we still have to be competitive.
Yeah.
So what is their rate versus our rate?
Do you know the rate? 50? We think 55. We don't know. We haven't actually. We just hearing what people are saying they're being charged. I've heard a couple different numbers.
And we charge how much?
Depends. You get a discount for the longer you buy the pass. One
Right.
pass is about 76 a month, but if you buy it for a whole 12 months, it's in the 50 range. It just decreases. You get a discount that way, but you have to buy it for a whole year.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Mayor Dion.
Now, just for council's note, tomorrow in Regina at 3 o'clock, I'm meeting with Dustin Duncan, who's the minister in charge of SGI for the readers and the parking and the compound. I have probably 5 items that we're going to discuss on trying to find a solution.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we appreciate the presentation. Vote is open. We're waiting on one vote still to come in. Vote is now closed and carried. Unfinished business, we have none. Do we have a motion for adjournment? Councillor Kilmer,
I'll move adjournment.
opening the vote. Vote is open. Carried. We are going to take a 20-minute break as 2 members of the meeting have to get on the highway this evening. So we will close this